May I have a motion on the agenda?
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Councilor Moore, any discussion? All in favor of adopting our agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so tonight we're hearing from Burlington Telecom, water, wastewater, stormwater, the airport, Church Street Marketplace, traffic, BED, police, regional programs, and retirement. So
Whew.
we'll start to see if there's anyone who would like to address the council. And this time I open up the public forum. Seeing none, I will close the public forum and we'll roll right into Burlington Telecom, and we have 15 minutes scheduled for Mr. Baraclough. So,
Okay,
floor is yours.
right. So Burlington Telecom has had another gangbuster year. It'll be the second one in a row. It's had several pretty good years, but the last 2 years have been particularly good. From a revenue perspective, we're right on budget. I'm bewildered. It must be luck I got within $16,000 on a $9 million forecast, but that's where we think we'll be. In terms of EBITDA, which is the measure of profit which we measure the business by, we've had a spectacular year. We're up from 2.8 million last year to 3.5. Unless something goes meaningfully wrong in May and June, and indications for May are our subscriber growth will be higher than May last year. Unless something goes wrong, we'll deliver in excess of 3.6 million for the year on revenues of 9 million. It's an EBITDA percentage of about 40%, and that'll be $700,000 plus up on 2016. In terms of subscriber adds, around 750 plus or minus 25 either side. We budgeted 750. That's down from last year where we did 869, but last year was a bit of an anomaly. That was up from 612 the year before, and I don't like to budget figures I think are going to be hard to match. The reason we've really delivered on the EBITDA side is that we thought we might need more resources. As the business hits various pressure points, we didn't need more resources. We also were able to attract peering from Google and Facebook and Akamai in Burlington, and 60% of our traffic goes to them. What that basically means is that for all of the internet we use to provide those services, they give it all back to us. So not only do we get a much faster service, we get a lower cost. And the other thing we benefited from was last year we changed out the routing of our telephone traffic and found more efficient ways to do that. So our gross margin again went up. We're about as far as we can get now on gross margin and EBITDA, and our intent is to try and maintain at these levels. I think there are a few more, if any, efficiencies that we're going to be able to wring out of the business. The challenge for us is how quickly we grow going forward, and whether if we grow around 750, maybe up to 1,000 subs a year, I think we can maintain that with the current number of staff we have. If it's more than that, we're going to hit pressure points and need to increase staff. Next one, Rich, sorry. Subscriber counts are, as of 1st May, 6.7, we're at almost 6.8. Now I expect we'll end the year between 6.9 and 7,000, which would be another milestone. We're net 491, but we do believe we're in the June and July are two of the busiest months of the year. Last year we put on well over 200 subscribers. In those 2 months we expect to do well over 200 again this year. I'd be disappointed if we don't end up at 750. That will take us to almost 7,000 subscribers. Next one. 18, I won't go through every one of these, but the real focus of BT for the last several years has been twofold. One is to really offer, well, really threefold. One, not to engage in price promotion, but to keep our everyday prices as low as we can. We can never win price promotion against our competition. It's a losing game. But we can offer two things that they can't. One is ultra-fast broadband at prices as competitive as anywhere in the US, which is what we do for residents. And then we can offer customer service, which really the competition not only can't match, but isn't interested in matching. And that customer service is what really drives our subscriber growth. We don't go out and prospect new subscribers. We respond to phone calls that come into BT from people wanting our service. And when you get to a certain level, if you continue, and it's part of our DNA now, and if you really focus on that, then it tends to feed on itself. We grow our subscribers from word of mouth reference, not from prospecting, cold calling, or anything else. Other milestones, revenues over 9 million this year. We believe they'll reach 10 million next year for the first time. EBITDA, we believe, will hit 4 million for the first time next year. EBITDA as a percentage of revenues, 40%. Couple of words on capital expenditure, which is interesting. So this year we budgeted $1,950,000. We got approval from Blue Water and the BTAB to increase that by 100,000 to $2,050,000. That 100,000 enabled us to start to build out the new North End. Next year, our major expansion project is the new North End, and we expect to build 100% of the new North End between over this summer and autumn and next spring. We've also just completed a study on the balance of building out the balance of Burlington, and we believe we've still got work to do on it, but there are only about 1,300 homes we won't have built out after the new North End, and we believe that we can cost effectively build out all but about 150 of those homes. So we're hoping that we're going to get to around 98-99% of the addressable market in Burlington from BT's own cash flow. And the shout out here is really to Trey Pecor and Blue Water. As you all know, Burlington's telecom's being sold this year. The normal way in which you operate when a business is sold is you don't spend a penny apart from what you need to keep the light bulbs on. You just don't spend it, because as an owner who's becoming a seller, you get no benefit. But next year, our capital expenditure budget is $2 million, and it'll involve finishing the new North End and starting to build out other unbuilt areas. And this is happening because we have real momentum at the moment, and the current ownership and the BTAB and others are concerned to maintain that momentum. We don't want to do anything precipitous which actually stops that momentum from continuing. So that's a highly unusual situation, because by the time BT's sold and a new CPG is approved by the Public Service Board, it's likely to be Q4 of 2018. So all of that CapEx will be for Burlington's benefit, but not for Blue Water's benefit. And then the last thing is part of our continued focus is BTV Ignite. We've just recruited a new executive director who everyone's really excited about, brings a skill set and experiences. He's an American, but has spent the last 10 years in Europe running accelerators, building tech ecosystems. He has skills and expertise we don't have in this part of the world, and it's a pretty exciting situation. And then lastly, our other major focus for next year is St. Joe's. It's taken some time to get off the ground, but we're going to be providing most of the telephone and broadband infrastructure for St. Joe's, and we're not doing this to make a profit, make a lot of money. We're doing it to really be a community supporter, and we're really excited about that opportunity. Forecast the budget for next year is, let me do that. So I've already been through the highlights of it. Revenues from 9 to 10 million, EBITDA from 3.5 to 4. Operating expenses go up by 300. That's really due to us putting in provision for 3 new heads. Don't know whether we'll need them or not. They're in the other line of 194, 740. We always budget extra heads every year because we run BT very tightly. We don't know where pressure points are going to emerge, and we want to be able to react to them when they do emerge. If we don't need those heads, we won't spend that money, and that'll again flow to the bottom line. Scroll down a bit, Rich. I think we've already been through CapEx is 2 million versus 2,050,000. After all expenses, after 2 million on CapEx, after debt service, we're still going to put about $1 million in the bank next year if everything goes according to plan.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Beautiful.
Council? Council Boucher?
So this is so bittersweet for me. No, you know, so it's really hard not to look back and not to understand that, you know, I didn't want to go in the direction we ended up having to go in. And so I'm really, I just think that, you know, so many lessons learned. It takes a long time for a business to get established and to become profitable. And
Particularly an infrastructure business,
Right,
which
right.
this is long-term infrastructure. This isn't a business that can ever cash flow and make a profit in the first 1 to 2 years. If you can break even in 4, 5, or 6 years in a business like this, you've done remarkably well because the upfront capital costs are so large.
so outrageous. So,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, everyone knows the story. It's just really unfortunate. But it's really, I mean, I think it also took leadership that you've provided to right this ship that was sinking. And so I'm really pleased that the investment that the community wanted to take is now really turning that corner and showing what it can be and what it will become. And I'm just thankful for, I mean, this may be, I don't know if this is the last budget, but, you know, I can never thank you enough for everything you've done of showing me and giving me, I mean, the way you run your department and the way some other department heads run their departments have given me such insight as to, but how to look at other budgets and how to look at other departments, to be, even the way you budget for personnel, placing, not necessarily needing, but forecasting you might need them. So I just want to appreciate all of that. I have nothing to say except, wow, if we had only held on. So thank you very much.
Council? Any other council? Council Reynolds?
Well, I would just add that it actually is because, in large part because of the new management that took over running it. It wasn't necessarily being run exactly as a business before. And we were running into a lot of financial problems before and other issues. Just, it was,
Thanks.
and I agree. Great job.
One clarification question. I think you mentioned that you'd be putting about $980,000 in the bank at the end of the year.
Yes.
Is that an asset that stays with the company and becomes part of what's purchased by the new ownership, or is that something that?
What would normally happen, but may or may not happen here, this will be an asset purchase. So what you would normally do is basically transfer whatever balance was represented by net current assets, which is current assets minus basically receivables netted against payables and other things like that. And then the balance of the cash would be distributed amongst the owners in relationship to their ownership share.
And then one other question about the infrastructure that's proposed for construction going forward here in the New North End. Is there any risk that a new owner would not, consider continuing that build out?
I am actually hopeful that we will find And I've no idea how many LOIs we'll get, but I'm hopeful that as part of any finalists we were to bring before the council, at least one, if not both of them, would commit to continue. If I look at it from a purely economic perspective, and we look at BT's ability, I mean, we've now done engineering studies to enable us to expand into Winooski, South Burlington, Williston, and Essex. And believe it or not, given the way we've now approached the build out in the rest of Burlington, building out the rest of Burlington is economically more sensible than moving to anywhere outside of Burlington. So I wouldn't be advocating building anywhere outside of Burlington before we finish Burlington. It makes the most economic sense. So we've found ways. A couple of years ago, we turned our head of the install team into our engineer, and he's a guy with encyclopedic knowledge of the network. And we said, your sole focus now is to figure out how we can build out the rest of Burlington cost effectively. We started with the downtown core, which was the most complex, and then moved to the rest. And the guy has proved, his name's Will Shane. He was the number 7 employee at BT. You won't find a better person and a more honest and decent person than Will. And he's proved to be absolutely brilliant at his new tasks.
Under our original terms, the certificate of public good, wasn't there language in there that we were supposed to continue the efforts to try to build out everywhere throughout the city? Wasn't that a part of it? And if that was with a new owner, or if partnering with us, if that was the case, where would that stand? I mean, if a new owner, do they not have to?
So you're absolutely right that the original CPG included a commitment to build out 100% of the city. As you're aware, we then breached the CPG, and we went before the Public Service Board to cure the CPG a couple of years back. As part of that cure, the condition of building out the rest of Burlington was removed. But the good news, as I've said, is from everything we can see, if BT is going to spend its cash wisely, the most cost-effective thing, and it's something we're committed to do. So as BT, we'll be pushing any new owner or investor really hard. About 150 homes we can't get to. I mean, one home alone is $38,000 for one home. We're just not going to get there. But you know, all but about 150 homes we can, and then we'll have to see if there are innovative ways of getting at those remaining few homes.
Okay, thanks. I didn't remember that language, that was part of the cure, but thanks.
All right, I guess we need to move on, but thank you very much, Stephen.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And we will move on to water, wastewater, and stormwater.
Have a safe. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Moyer. I'm the division head in charge of water, wastewater, and stormwater. I think I'm actually right about at my 1-year anniversary of having stepped into Lori Adams' well-worn and very big shoes. And here to talk to you about our FY18 budget proposal. You can go ahead and advance the slide. Over the various years, water, wastewater, and stormwater have sometimes been in separate divisions. As of about, I think, 2014, they were unified under one water resources division, given the interaction that they all have with one another as far as providing quality of life for our citizens, clean, healthy water to drink and to recreate in. Next slide. This just kind of breaks down the specifics of what we think about when we think about water. The water division, which is primarily water supply, the wastewater division, which deals with the sanitary waste that comes from your homes, and stormwater management, which manages rainwater runoff or precipitation-driven parts, including the combined sewer system. We have a very big house. It's a very old house, and you guys have been helping us to address some of the issues with this old house. I think Chapin may have hit upon all of the different assets that we manage, but there's a lot of them. Next slide. I want to just take a brief moment to thank you for FY17's budget approval. In that budget, as well as in this budget, we are either expanding or maintaining our capital investment. And with the money that we had in FY17, although sometimes we have the challenges of having enough time to do and spend all of the money that we need to be spending, we have gotten a great deal of things done, including a new water quality panel, which provides real-time information about the effluent quality of our sewage that's going out. Of course, the water main relining project, that's a picture, I believe, on Pitkin Street. We've started replacing the many valves in our filter gallery at the water treatment plants. That's me next to the screen on our raw water. It hadn't been pulled up from the lake for 30 years, and this was our opportunity to pull it up, scrape off all of the very stinky zebra mussels, and also make some modifications so that our diver will be able to do better cleaning without us having to pull it up. Polymer pumps, clarifier blanket detector, that specifically I put in there because that is one of the things that will help hopefully prevent or at least give us advance warning of issues like the one we had with the wastewater treatment plant about a month ago. It was something that we had already ordered when that happened, and it would have helped us. Lots of budget goals to try to balance with this FY18 budget. Of course, we're always trying to make sure that we have enough resources to our primary goal is to have strong regulatory compliance, which also equates to, as I said, clean drinking water and happy recreation. On the capital side, in water capital, as we'll go into a little bit more detail, we're expanding specifically the capital monies that we're spending on our distribution system, which is the system of pipes that carries water to your homes. And we're making sure that we're maintaining the capital investment in the rest of our water system. We're not trying to borrow from Peter to pay Paul. We're trying to make sure we're holding steady on that. On the wastewater and stormwater side, we are maintaining our capital investments to basically still catch up on a lot of deferred maintenance while maintaining regulatory compliance. Some of those issues are addressing long-term electrical safety issues that we've had that really need to be taken care of. A large portion of our budget is dealing with the new debt service requirement that we have with our water bond and maximizing the health of the water fund so that we are able to maintain or hopefully improve our Moody's rating, which we recently just got an A1 rating, which is, I think, two clicks above the city, so we are really happy with that. Sorry.
Happy for you.
There's a couple of personnel-related changes that, one in particular to balance that tension I said between the money and the time, making sure we have enough time, enough staff resources to spend and get the capital money on the ground, as well as updating some aspects of our organizational structure to kind of reflect our current day operations. We're able to do this by leveraging our reasonably healthy cash balances that we have across wastewater and stormwater, and trying to kind of balance the overall rate increase that we need over the couple of years, and we'll go into more details about that. So this is they're supposed to put this up, even though you guys have it in your packets. You can see we are leveraging cash in all of the funds. Some portion of that cash is for known specific one-time things. In other cases, particularly in wastewater, we're using the cash that wastewater has to balance out the overall rate increase that we need this year with next year. And as we go through the proposed rates for the next few years, you'll kind of see how that balances out. Hopefully you guys agree our O&M, or operation maintenance days of cash on hand, is still quite healthy. We're well over a third of the year for all of the funds, and so we feel comfortable at this point using that cash that we have on hand. That may change in the future as we get closer to some of our other decision-making places, but for now, we're comfortable with this. Next slide. Some key drivers on the revenue side. We did factor in some additional consumption due to growth in the city. We think FY19 and 20 will have better numbers and have more growth due to projects like Cambrian Rise, Bayberry Commons, the one on Grove Street that's coming online, and certainly any other large projects like the mall will help with the consumption side that will affect primarily the water and wastewater revenue, but to some extent, as we get into expansion projects, that will also help stormwater as it creates more impervious surface. But generally speaking, a lot of our projects are redevelopment, and you're not necessarily seeing the bump in stormwater that you would in water and wastewater. We did increase our wholesale rate. This is only for water sold to Colchester Fire District 2. So we did do a relatively modest increase or substantial increase for their water based on some of the cost increases that we had. And we are implementing a new, what we're calling an off-cycle water meter reading charge to recover staff costs. These are readings that happen when there's a sale. So we get a call from the lawyer, and because somebody's leaving their house in between when we read the meters, we have to do a special trip, we have to fill out special forms. And we've noticed that many other Vermont communities have this fee, and so we feel like that's a good opportunity for us to collect a little bit of money and recover some costs. Next slide. On the expense side, we're gonna dive into the water debt service because that is an increase in water of approximately 239,000. Next slide. As a reminder, this was the awesome 88% yes vote for our bond. That was an authorization of $8.34 million. We're biting off a huge chunk this year to kind of try to get ahead of the paving program. It's a continuation of our FY17 budget, in which you may remember that we actually got council authorized borrowing. We had a very substantial capital line because we didn't know how the bond was going to go, and we wanted to try to spend as much money as possible and authorize as much money as possible to get that initial jump. So this jump is being continued. The list of projects is there. About 2.7 miles is being replaced through the relining process that we used last year, a much improved relining process where we now know many of the things that we didn't know last year as far as communication and the steps and some of the hurdles that can happen. And then we are pursuing some open dig replacement. This is primarily where there's pipes that are either undersized or there's something else related to those pipes that we know we just need to go ahead and dig it up. The estimated debt service, which we recently got the final debt service schedule, and we're trying to factor that in before we come to the council with our final budget resolution. But that debt service is really a substantial part of the rate increase that we're going to be getting to in a few moments. Suspense. Some other things to keep in mind that I think will help when you're looking at our rate tables. We are changing how we account for the franchise fee. So we, water and wastewater, like BED, when we charge a customer the retail revenue, 3.5% of that is charged and goes back to the general fund per the city charter. For the longest time, and I don't know why, it's been included as an expense line in the annual budget when it's really more of a liability account item that should be tracked separately, and it makes it very awkward when we're playing with our budgets because I bump up my revenue in order to deal with my expenses, and then I have to bump up that line item, and it's a back and forth, and it's not really an operating expense. And so in this budget, we are extracting it from the rate. So when you guys set the rate, you're setting the true rate, but when you think about cost to the customer, and we've calculated that, there is an extra 3.5% on top of that. It's always been there, it's just been contained within the rate. And we can, if you guys have questions about that, we can go over that. Can you just go back quickly? I've detailed the addition of a limited service position that will be coming back to the Board of Finance and City Council to approve, as well as some reorganization and reclassifications that we think will make more sense. Specifically in wastewater, we have 3 plants and 25 pump stations, and we've often had, or we've always had 2 chiefs that kind of run things separately, even though they all kind of work together as one system, given that the main wastewater plant actually handles the sludge from the other plants, and they need to be viewed as one unit whole. And so the substantial reclassification or reorg that we're doing is to put one person in charge of all of the wastewater sort of business, which will, I think, help us find efficiencies, help us realize whether or not we can do some cross-training of staff, and not keep us so siloed as we have been in the past. Next slide. This is just the detail of all of the ups and downs. You can see most of the arrows are up, which I think you're probably finding with some of the other budgets that you've heard. Some of the things that are out of our control, healthcare, some of the indirect costs, So it's just a challenge every year in that budget. We do have ever escalating costs. We are continuing that focus on capital, and I think this is a great graph to show the work that you guys have done in helping us get to the point of starting to invest in our systems the way we need to. The FY17 and FY18, that last bar of purple is the bond funded capital. So that's an additional amount above and beyond our what we call our pay-go capital, which is what's in our annual budget each year. So opportunities and challenges, things for you guys to know that I see when I look at the budget. With the water debt, we're going to have to maintain a 1.25 debt coverage ratio, which means and there are formulas involved, but it's just it's a check that Rich and I do before we end up approving any budget to make sure that we're not going to be out of compliance with our bond. We're looking to certainly maintain, if not improve, our Moody's A1 rating. Sorry, Bob.
It's okay.
There is possibly going to be some future water resource borrowing. The 8.34 that we've gotten, I do view that as a start. We have 110 miles. I think, was it 42% are over 75 years old? That initial slug is only probably going to get us maybe 8 to 10, maybe 12 miles if we get really good and efficient. So there's still a lot of pipe out there that we're going to have to replace, and we're going to be trying to figure out how we do that in the most fiscally sustainable and responsible way. There's also some other things, our storage tanks, those have to be repainted and maintained. And you can see, particularly the UVM tank, painting that puppy is about $1 million. And it's not until FY27, but that's a lot of money to spend on a paint job. In wastewater, this graph represents, as things stand now, if we kept our existing capital where it is, we are looking at some pretty substantial possible capital deficits in the years to come, particularly in 2020. And so we are going to be contemplating how we're going to address those. Also, how do they overlap with the TMDL requirements? We don't want to replace something that the TMDL is going to make us completely upgrade at a different point, but we're trying to figure that out.
You want to make sure you also leave time for questions.
Yep. So on the positive side, we do expect revenue to go up from our own customer base. However, we do know that we're going to be losing a portion of South Hadley that drains to us starting in FY19. And we are possibly looking at losing some septage and sludge hauling customers depending on how the Lake Champlain TMDL goes. However, we're committed to doing some enhanced financial planning so that we're better able to look at the long range and also integrate escalation, capital planning costs, debt service, track our cash flow, all of those things that we need to be looking at to determine our financial health. And also as part of the integrated planning project, we're going to be trying to crack the nut of financial capability assessment. We recognize that customers can't just keep having rate increases with no cap. At some point, we're going to be really bumping up against people on fixed incomes if we're not already, and we're going to have to address that and figure that out. So all of this leads us to a overall rate increase of about 3.2% when you look at all of the rates together. As I said, almost 50% of that is due specifically to the water debt. If we didn't have that water debt and we hadn't had that bond, our overall rate increase would be about 1.7%. And so what we're doing in this year, we've actually backed off on the base wastewater rate in order to kind of feather out that rate increase. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that in FY19, we have a similar rate increase. So instead of jacking things up this year and then having a low rate increase next year, we're spreading things out using a little bit of wastewater's cash, and then wastewater will essentially kind of have a catch up as will stormwater in that year when, as we model it currently, water doesn't need as much of a rate increase then. And so that's what we will be asking for you guys to approve or something similar.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions?
Sorry, I often drink from the fire hose.
Yes, Council Paul.
So the first question I have is, I don't know, I can't remember now, was it 2.75 million that was going to be spent on, or no, 274, oh gosh, now I can't remember what the number is, on the digging and on the relining?
That was the number of miles.
No, but I mean, there was a dollar amount that was on the chart.
3.25 million.
Okay, that's
So that's
the number.
3.25 million of the 8.3 that we got authorized.
So when you do that, do you have to dig up the street? How do you do that?
I believe that they usually, when they're doing open dig, they don't just dig a trench the entire length of the street, they go in sections. But it is potentially more intrusive than the relining process. As you guys may recall, the relining process does still require us to dig pits, but it's not one long trench.
Okay, so it's not, so these are streets that are not taken like totally out of commission for 6-8
No, no.
weeks?
No, and we would be breaking it up as much as we can, yeah.
Okay, and then the other question I have is the amount that you're asking for this year. Did you give any thought to, when you said that you were breaking it up over 3 years, how did you do that in terms of, are you meeting your expenses every single year? Is there one year where you're exceeding your expenses and trying to, get money in advance? Which, is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know if you're doing that, and if you are you investing it somewhere, or how are you doing that?
So this FY18, we are planning on using fund balance across the board. Water is using a very small amount of fund balance. Wastewater, stormwater, I think is 20,000, which is approximately equivalent to a one-time expense that I can identify in the budget. And then wastewater, I believe it's two something.
You're talking fund balance from just water?
From
Are you talking general fund balance?
No.
Okay.
Each fund, stormwater fund, wastewater fund, and water fund, each have their own fund balance, being that they're enterprise accounts. So they have cash on hand that we can look at, and we can make sure that even when we use that amount of fund balance, there's still sufficient cash on hand, in most cases 120 to 140 days, that we could cover if for some reason everybody stopped paying their bills. We would have enough cash to get us through that many days. So FY 19-20, the way it's structured now, there is no use of deficit in those years.
Okay. I mean, that is rather impressive, as the cash on hand figures. Those are really great. Congratulations on that. And Bob, if you would stay around for a couple more years, then we'll get our credit rating back up, and then you too can have an A1 credit rating.
Let's also remember the ratepayers.
Right.
Yes. Councilor Busher.
Yeah,
We're giving credit.
So I am a little concerned about as rates go up. And so I think that there is something that I'm not understanding. On one of your pages, you've got proposed FY 18 water resource rates, and you have the monthly cost for the average homeowner as $81.59, but then with the summary, you've got the monthly cost for the average homeowner as $70.77.
Oh, you always find a typo.
And I just, well, no, but.
No, it probably is a typo because there's so many numbers
Because
yes.
this and I was hoping that you would tell me that you found a way to make it 70-77, because I don't think it probably is.
Where's the 70-77?
It's on the
this
last
summary
page.
and I wasn't
On the
quite
summary.
sure. I was hoping that.
Let me see quickly. If it's a math, it just may be a math error.
Or,
So I just wanted to, I wasn't quite sure if I was missing something or not.
Nope, I think
Math error.
it's the last one is correct. But can I follow up?
It's gotta be 80.
Yeah.
80.
It's 80.
Darn it. Yeah.
It's 80 something,
So it,
Let me just look at my, where the
Okay,
actual
so-
percentage comes from.
closer to the 82.
So, I mean-
I think, rather than you trying to get that information
Right,
now,
right.
maybe we can get that information.
right, no, but my point is, if it is 80,
Yeah.
so if it was 70-77, I felt okay.
Yes, 'cause
But
that's
it's 81.50, which I don't think it is.
Yeah.
It's 81.59. I am a little concerned about that. I mean, as it, this is, overall, I know how much money we have to invest, and I know the support that the voters have, but people who are on fixed incomes aren't getting that much a year from Social Security, and God knows where it's gonna go after this year. But, so I am a little worried about how we try to figure this out. So you highlighted it, I just wanted to echo, I
It's
agree.
a concern of mine, and I think
Yeah.
we can look at rate structures, we can look at, one thing we've been talking about is affordability programs where low-income people get some sort of break
Yeah.
on it, because we do have these costs. So, and the only other thing to note is that, when we do that monthly cost, we take the average use to get that.
Right.
Many people are below that
Yes.
amount, but
I realize
yeah,
that. But
it's
anyway,
still going
thank
up.
you.
Yep.
Once again, this is incredible, a very detailed and good presentation. Thank you. Thank you.
Any other counselor? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much, Megan, and we will move on to the airport.
You guys could fly on over here.
Oh.
This is the fastest touch.
Oh,
Late in the day.
boy, wow.
Land over on the
How
other
long did it
side.
take you to think that up, or did that just come right out?
He was talking about it this morning,
I may have a few questions for you.
Is that gonna be your next career,
Stand-up comedian would be a really short career.
Very good. Hello, everyone, and thank you for your attention. So we're here to represent and let you know about our airport budget. You have here, as part of this presentation, you have our overall operating revenue and expenditure budget. So we just always like to let you know a little bit about the airport, because everybody knows that we fly, but we have so much more going on at the airport. We have our 12 terminal gates. We have 2,700 stall car garage spaces. We have lots of spaces that you can all park in, so it's always good to remind people that. And of course, we have the National Air Guard. And we have a lot of runways and a lot of things that are going on around the airport. Our property is very vast, and we have a lot of partners, a lot of businesses. Next. So we have 12 nonstop different markets that we fly to. So you can get pretty much anywhere out of Burlington. A lot of times it's going through one hub, but you can get anywhere from where we are. And we have approximately 1.2 million, a little bit more than that, folks flying in and out of the Burlington International Airport. We've done really well with some of our newest routes that we've had. We've added Atlanta in recent years. We've added Charlotte. In fact, they added the second Charlotte flight daily. Remind me.
Yep, the second Charlotte flight to North Carolina, and then American just added the LaGuardia flight for us in conjunction with Delta Airlines. I think what's important on this one is the diversity of the airlines that we have today, and it's really, really important that as we have this airline contract in place, that diversity stays and remains strong like it is today.
And the other thing I want to say is that some of our air carriers are adding, especially in the more popular routes, they're adding larger planes. So they're finding that Burlington is servicing really, really well, and they're filling, and our flight loads are great. So they're bringing in larger planes, which means we can accommodate more passengers. So it's a win-win for everybody, for the community, and everybody who uses our airport.
And one thing different, and we've mentioned this to you earlier, but which makes this budget probably one of the strongest budgets we've had in a long time, is the lease with the airlines. That's really important because we have a catcher. If we run into a problem, we have a partner that will help share that experience with us. So that's a really great thing.
Thank you. So we're always working to increase our air service. We always want to have additional flights. We always want to have more places we fly. We always want to have even more affordable options. So that's something that we work on continuously as a team at the airport with our partners, and also looking to recruit additional partners.
One other thing this year that helped the budget be stronger is the predictability with our relationship with South Burlington on the tax issue. That is something that's, we have a 13-year contract, so it is predictable in the future. We've never had that, at least as long as I've been there. It's been a really long time, and each year it would go up, and we wouldn't quite understand, but what we do know is that for the next 13 years it'll be predictable, and then there'll be a methodology that we can use in the future to help us understand how we might get to that understanding in the relationship.
So in line with we we have the various cost centers that we have, sort of our different functions that we have at the airport, and this is also the way we line up with our airline agreement. So we have accountability to the airlines with our agreement, but they also have insurance with us, where they sort of backstop us should we have something unforeseen happen at the airport. And so these are just our different cost centers, and we've kind of tried to highlight them so you get a sense of how we code our expenses, because you'll see, it's a little confusing, right? All of our different cost centers that we have. But the purpose is that we want to group things together that make sense, whether there be terminal related to the terminal, the revenue and the expenses, whether related to the parking, whether related to the airfield. So we just code it that way so that we know how much revenues we're bringing in related to those functions, and we also know how much our expenses are to operate those particular functions. So we have a couple of pages in there with our organizational chart. I don't know if you have any questions on that. Some of our fiscal challenges. So, it's always, I'm sure you hear this all the time, it's always challenging to take a look at our expenses and see what we can do better. We have a lot of things that drive our budget that are somewhat out of our control. We try very hard to control all the things that we can. That we can do better on, but some of the functions that we have, whether they're compliance issues or whether they're expenses, it's hard to control our winters, and it's hard to control, I'm sure that, other departments have this as well, that there are just costs that are related. We have a very vast operation, and so there's a lot of things that happen. It may be a concrete that opens up on an apron, or it may be something that happens in the parking garage. So we have different things that we struggle to control, and we do the best that we can. We really strive to always control our expenses. So our key goals, we are always, our air service, we want to increase that. That is the main function of what we do. We do a lot with marketing, so that we want to bring awareness to people who want to fly there. We also have increased and I know we do this in BTV Stat, our advertising, and we recognize a lot of people go in and out of the building, not just 1.2 people flying in and out, but all the people that escort those other people into the building. So we have a very high visibility, and we're improving our advertising revenues. Our number one thing is at the airport is safety and security, especially in the environment that we live in, we want safety on the air, all of the airplanes that are landing, so keeping our runways good. We have a lot of projects that are going on just on the airport side of things. We're predicting close to $48 million alone in our capital budgets this year, potentially. We always have to wait for the FAA to approve our grants. But we also have a lot of other constructions that are going on the airfield side that the Guard is doing. And so these are all improvements to our runways and to our apronways that are huge in keeping our airport viable and healthy and our runways safe.
On the advertising, I'd encourage you, next time you're flying through, to come a little early and obviously eat a skinny pancake, but to take a look at what we're advertising and how we're advertising it, and that we're interacting with you, we're trying to stimulate you and bring you out in the advertising. And it is Vermont, reinforcing Vermont in a really unique and special way. So when you're there, take a little time and take a peek at what we're doing. We work really hard to make money reinforcing Vermont.
Thank you. And we have a tab in there for our debt coverage, service coverage. It has been an emphasis of the airport for a long time, but a number of years back, quite a few years back at this point, the airport did not make their debt coverage ratio. And that was a tragedy for the airport, and it really took, put us on shaky ground all the way around. And so really since 2012, and Jean taking the helm, and also working under the mayor and working under this administration, really made that an emphasis and made that absolutely, we cannot ever go back to where we were. And so we have consistently for years been maintaining our debt coverage ratio either very close to 1.5, and now we will guarantee it at 1.5 with our airline agreement. They actually are guaranteeing that we will hit that. They will fund us more if we don't quite make it. And likewise, we share with them if we have a really great year, bring in a lot of extra revenues, our expenses are not as high as we predicted, we will share those savings with them. So we will always hit 1.5 debt coverage ratio now. They're our partners in that. And I know that that's important for everybody here, looks at us as one of our metrics. And also, with that, we have reserves and also increasing our days cash on hand, which we have, our chart goes like this, you know, and Moody's, when the last time they were reviewing us, was just could not say enough at the rate that we've been able to build those cash reserves and the days cash on hand. You know, impressive. I wish they did give us a positive outlook on our rating, and so we are hoping that we're primed to improve that over the next year.
But in doing that, we are not only increasing our days of cash on hand, but we're also at the same time dealing with the deferred maintenance on equipment, the building, the garage. So it's almost like we're having a double savings. We're actually managing the asset times two, because you're
Yes.
going in two different directions.
So let's see, I'm just looking to see if there's anything. I've kind of talked a little bit about, you know, we've got stable revenues that are just a slight uptick. We've had some challenges with some increases we've seen in some of our stormwater compliance and our underground injection control. And I think I've touched on some of the other things. Our garage has seen a slight uptick in our revenues this year, so we're pleased and hoping that we can continue in that direction. Next slide, please. So these are our employments. We are looking at projecting, our airlines give us numbers in terms of some projections, and they're looking and thinking they're going to see about a 3% increase in our employments this year. Next slide.
One more thing.
Yep.
One thing, and I'm sure you're all looking at this as well, but yeah, the whole Uber relationship was controversial at one point, and we're doing amazingly well each month with that. What did we get this last month?
$8,000.
$8,000. That's huge compared to what we've ever received before. And it's every month, it's getting better and better and better. Whether you're pro it or not, we're going to be doing some other things to try to be accountable to our income in that area. But it's a big deal, and it's also a big deal to the city. You know, if you look at your numbers on the same thing, you're doing very well. We charge more at the airport. But it's been a big deal to our bottom line where we've lost revenue in the garage. This has helped compensate for that.
So our debt coverage ratio score, talk a little bit about that. And then our next slide. So one of the ways that we manage our airport improvement program, our grants, our FAA grants, because it's cash flow. We spend money and then we have to request reimbursement, and there's a little bit of a delay in there, is we have been taking out a $7 million grant anticipation note, and that's worked very well for us. The interest, we are putting in some of it, we get reimbursed on the interest because they're FAA programs from our PFC program, and so it's really a win-win for us. Next. And then our reserves, which have been very consistent. You can see how far they've come in such a short time. And that is it. So I want to give a couple minutes for questions.
It's really a great story, but we still work hard every day, and we still fear the day. You know, I mean, we're working really hard to do a good job, and the team works really hard. It's a good story, but we don't get too cocky because we don't control a lot of factors. We just manage the days, and that's like every city department, I'm sure. But one thing I learned early is zip it and don't get cocky, because tomorrow could be a different day.
One thing we did want to mention is next fiscal year, we'll have $50 million worth of projects open at the airport, which I'm not sure how much that makes it into the financial presentation, because we use that GAN to cover when we pay a contractor and then FAA reimburse us. But we won't start a project until we get a grant offer from FAA. And all of this money is coming through from the federal government. We're entitled generally to $3.5 million based on the size of our airport and the amount of business. So we've been able to get FAA to participate in a lot of improvement projects at this airport, and it's been an aggressive approach. Every time we sit down with them, we definitely have a reputation of asking for the moon. But it's been a very successful relationship that we've had with them, and a lot of it is just justifying why there's a need and why it's important to invest in our airport.
We're competing with 50 other airports. So what Amanda's saying is this team kicks ass getting the money that we don't. I mean, we're really lucky to get the amount of money that we get. And our airport does need the money, but so doesn't the other 50 other airports. So we've been very fortunate.
Councilor Paul?
Thank you. This is all great. You know, you do an amazing job. One of the concerns, one concern that I have, and a lot of it relates to the amount of flying that I do myself personally, is often when I get on planes, a good number of the people that are on planes are speaking French. And we have a large number of people who come down from Canada to fly out of BTV. What is the, what is the amount, the dollar amount to the Canadian dollar to which that would become a concern, and what are your plans should that happen?
So we're currently, there was a time we were doing about 35% Canadians. Today, we're doing about 13, and it has everything to do with the exchange. So it's only uphill from here for both us and Plattsburgh. We both have a whole bunch to gain from that when that happens. Just track oil prices, you already know this, but when you see oil prices go up, I'm probably the only person in the world that said yay. Because when that happens, you're gonna see that the exchange will change and we will see that benefit. Is that what you were asking me or not?
Yeah, I mean, at some point, the Canadian dollar is going to, I'm just wondering.
It will help us when the Canadian
Yeah.
dollar becomes stronger against the
Right.
American dollar. So we have been actually, that interchange we've been looking forward to because we know that we'll see an uptick in our Canadian traffic. And even though our load factors, our employment factors are great, they can always be better. There's always some seats that aren't going. So
We've
if you
taken
can
it-
bring in more, it's better.
But we've taken it out of what we do. We still market to it heavily, but we don't count on it like we used to. That's why we got in trouble with the garage. We counted on something we couldn't depend on.
Yeah.
So now we're just gonna use it for gravy. And so we'll market to it, take it, and really cater to it. I think we're doing very well with it. We spend a lot of time in Montreal at the trade shows, and I think we do well. But I would say that it's only gonna be uphill for us from here on.
No, I agree with you. I think that, relying on it too heavily has not benefited us in the past because it's beyond our control. There's nothing that we can do about it. And I also am kudos on the diversity of carriers. There are other airports in New England that don't have that. And God help them if one of their carriers leaves, they could be in deep trouble. And fortunately, we're not in that situation. So good for us as well. Great job.
All right, thank you very much, nice presentation.
Just one more thing. I do want to thank Rich Goodwin. We struggled a little bit this year, and Rich came out and really put a lot of extra time and effort in, and gave us that confidence that we needed to push through. We had a lot of moving parts. So, Rich, I just want to thank you for continuing to do an amazing job that you do with us. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Have a good night.
So I think we're at Church Street Marketplace?
Yeah.
For some reason, I can't open up any of the Excel files.
Really?
Yeah. Is anyone else having problems with that? Yeah, just carry
You want to
on.
make sure that the mic can pick you up. What's up? You want to make sure the mic can pick you up.
Okay,
Ready?
so we have, we have about 15 minutes, so maybe 5-ish presentation and questions.
Sounds great. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thanks for taking time. It's a perfect evening to be inside and listening to people's budgets. Just a quick one on the Church Street Marketplace. I think you know how we're structured. We're certainly a very small department. If Jean is lean and mean, I must be something even worse than that. But we have more commissioners than we have staff, so maybe we'll have to work on that piece. But to understand the Church Street, next slide is great, thanks. To understand our our department is you really have to look at our revenues to understand what we're all about. We're an unusual organization in that we're a business improvement district, and there are 1,000 business improvement districts across the country. Many were started back in the 1970s and 80s, designed as an economic development tool. Most are private nonprofits. A few are run by municipalities. We're one of them. The marketplace itself has always been funded by the private sector. City tax dollars cannot be used to pay for Church Street. So you can see that the common area fees, the very top item, that's what the property owners pay every year. 30 property owners pay that much, and then they pass those on usually to the 100 or so business owners. So about 130 people are really funding the marketplace. So we have to be accountable to you. We have to be accountable to our mayor, but we also have to be accountable to our fee payers. So it makes it extra challenging. These are business people that deal with P&Ls all day long. So as tough as you guys are, sometimes they're even tougher. So that's how that works. You can also see our sidewalk cafe fees now represent about 11% of our revenue. And then trailing down, corporate sponsorships, cart vendor fees. We have 2 city properties that the city allows us to manage and collect rent on, the Lunix kiosk and Wim Boutique. We also manage Shelburne Road and Main Street banners. I don't know if you're aware of that, but that helps us get a little revenue as well. All right, so next one. So these were some things that the Marketplace Commission was talking about this season, and as they prepare for expansion, Kelly's in the room, and Kelly has a contract to look at hiring a consultant for a possible expansion of the Business Improvement District to cover the entire downtown. But as the commission's been talking about that, they've been looking at what it is that they contribute to the downtown, trying to see, identify where their strengths are. And obviously, we are many of these things. I think the redevelopment of Burlington Town Center, attracting investors, really helps to have the street. It's a great recruiting tool for UVM, Champlain, St. Mike's. We're generating a lot of interest when we have new hotels, et cetera. Again, one of the things that the commission watches is I'm a city employee working for them, so they want to make sure that they're getting the most from me. Next slide. So annual real estate taxes, the taxes they pay for the DID, and all the gross receipts taxes, the marketplace fee payers are contributing about $2.6 million per year. One of the concerns they've had over the years is the increase in indirect fees. These are the fees that are charged to non-general fund departments. You can see it's sort of been going up, and in FY19 they'll be working with the administration to try to find ways to reduce these fees or find some other options. It is a concern. They do look at every penny in the budget. They're very, very mindful. And this is one area that's really caught their attention and something that they're really focused on right now. I also want to tell you about our negative fund balance. Many of you remember we had kind of a tough place about FY12. I guess I also want to thank Bob Rustin and Rich Goodwin and really everybody in the finance and accounting department. We got the help that we needed. New World is a godsend. And as we've worked every year, you can see we have been chipping it away at our negative fund balance. We, in 2013, had $235,000. We're now down to, at the end of FY17, we will have $6,000 in the plus, and then we're projecting $45,000 of a surplus, which will put us at $51,000 at the end of FY18. We are building a capital reserve, and it will be at $51,000 at the end of FY18, God willing, because for the brick repair, we cannot use the city's capital budget. So we're saving money for that, and we'll see how that goes. It may prove to be unsustainable for us. Just to repair the Bank Street intersection is going to be about $100,000. So it'll take us quite a few years to work on that for brick repair. So looking ahead, marketplace staff, no common area fee increase. It's going to remain at 2.87. That was the rate in FY17. Decided to keep that the same for this coming year. That's not going to be an issue for us, but I think given some of the challenges in the downtown, it really makes sense to keep that rate at the current level. As I mentioned, we have a surplus of $45K. We are increasing our contribution to the street outreach program from $7,500 to $20,000. This is a very wonderful program, and my thanks to my colleagues in the city who have also really stepped up, and the city will be contributing more money towards the street outreach program. As funding has dissipated in other ways into the state, we're having to step up, and it's a good investment. It's a really, really good investment. So our office will actually be raising probably another $15,000 privately to contribute towards street outreach. So this is our budget. It's pretty simple. You can see we're about just under $1 million for 4 blocks, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. And the next slide. I want to also show you these two things. Since 2005, we have been surveying our fee payers, and these are basically our business owners, and asking them to evaluate the services that we provide. So whether it's marketing, maintenance, administration, security, every year we ask them to really give us a report card. And this chart sort of shows you since 2012, we just sort of took this little piece, gives you an idea of the types of things that we look at, the types of things we ask our customers to evaluate us on, and areas where if there's weaknesses, we can see those and start to make improvements. I would just have you look at maintenance. It has traditionally been our strongest area, and we rarely receive complaints from our fee payers around maintenance. We did have some issues, as you can see in 2014, under administration licensing for our cart vendor program. We had some concerns about how the program was being run. We took corrective action, and you can kind of see how we're able to move the dial the next year. The same goes for our street entertainer program, which was getting a lot of criticism around 2014. And we instituted some new measures. We talked with our street entertainers in the community and developed something that I think is a lot more popular and successful right now. So again, just a way for us to sort of look at our how we're doing. And the next slide. This is kind of cool. Social media is pretty important for us, and we are a small little city, 42,000, but we compare ourselves to other business improvement districts and what they're doing. We look a lot at what Boulder does, Tempe, Arizona, Boise. These are all college towns. And we started to look at our social media in terms of our Facebook likes and Instagram likes. And when you compare us to Santa Monica, Boulder, Tempe, some of these really big cities, we're doing pretty good. And so that's another way that we're measuring ourselves. That's it. Questions?
Questions? Councilor Bush.
So I had a question. I was looking for where, on the line item, where this fund balance was, and I couldn't figure it out. Is it 9500-110? I was just trying to figure out, you have a balanced budget, and yet I couldn't figure out where that dollar amount was placed, and so I just wanted to make sure I understood that it really is in the budget. Normally, this isn't but that's an important piece since we've been monitoring it so closely.
So the fiscal year 18 intention for $45,000 is in fact the account line that you identified.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. So, and then the other thing is that, just one other quick question. With the disruption downtown, I've asked this of other departments that I think are going to be impacted. Is there a conversation with the businesses about the common area fee and all of how they may be impacted by access to the street, et cetera, or how is that being handled? Is that conversation going on now or not?
Yeah, it's going on in a couple of ways.
And will that impact your budget? That's why this is not a generic thing. I'm really trying to focus on the budget.
I think there's concerns from the fee payers. We have lost a lot of retail in Burlington Town Center.
Yes.
And that retail draws customers, and when we don't have those large national retailers in the mall, it will affect our retail sales. Our retailers are starting to feel a little bit of that. How we can measure that is always hard. I think what's important for us is to convey a message of positivity. I think it's really easy to have the construction seem like it's going to really paralyze us, and it's really not. One of the things I will say is that we're working really closely with CEDO, and as far as the construction goes, in terms of communicating that, it'll be really important to communicate it daily and weekly, and to reassure people that stores are open and the downtown's ready for business.
And I'm just trying to figure out if it's going to impact you get most of your revenue from the common area fees, and I just didn't know whether there was a conversation about that going on.
There
that's
is
all.
there is a conversation about that, and the reason that we're not raising it this year is because of that. Because it's the one thing the commission can control. Another thing we're not doing is we're not raising sidewalk cafe fees, which is about 11% of our budget, and we probably won't raise it next year. So we probably will have less money for our capital. But we also want to be mindful of what will happen in the development period, the building period. After that, I think things, we all feel really positive.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
It's kind of like ripping off the Band-Aid.
So I'd like to ask about the bricks. I mean, I was not aware that you can't use any city sources to replace bricks. So that's all needs to be generated within the marketplace.
The city, we've actually spent a lot of time looking at the charter language. The city attorney can be more specific than I am in terms of this. But essentially what we believe the language says is that if we were doing capital work that is typical capital work done in the city, we could use city funds for that. But if you're doing capital work on Church Street that is unique to Church Street, the charter does not allow us to use city funds for that. So the bricks are unique to.
Okay, so understood, but I mean, so we're going to be investing in in our infrastructure all over Burlington, and in the heart of our downtown, we're going to be under-investing in those bricks. That makes no. I think we need to think about this differently.
It's a conversation that the commission has been having for years, and this administration has been really helpful in helping us to try to find ways to increase our capital budget. And they've done all kinds of really great things that have stayed true to the charter, but at the same time have helped us. But when it comes to things like brick repair, they just feel like the way that the charter is written right now, it is not possible to do that.
The charter is not written in stone. The charter is something that can be changed.
Correct, and I think that's one of the things that will be discussed, is to look at a change to the charter as it relates to
Looking
this.
meaningfully at the chair of the charter change committee.
That might be on our agenda this
I
year.
really think that this should be a pretty high priority.
Because didn't Patrick Leahy do the last, he generated funds for you for the last upgrade?
Last
Yeah.
35 years, we've relied on federal grants from basically from Leahy, and that's dried up, so
Right.
we're kind of not in a great place. So.
Yeah, one more,
So
Councilor.
does that also extend then to the, the glass canopies, the steel and glass canopies that are part of the marketplace as well, that you,
To have those removed,
or upgraded, or, improved, or?
I think we would never upgrade them. If a business owner is willing to pay for them to be removed, we will approve that.
All right,
Understood.
great, let's move on. Thank you very much, Ron, appreciate your time. Traffic.
You don't need to stretch yet?
No, we're good. We're just gonna roll on through.
All right, great. Good evening. On the Chapin Spencer, Director of Public Works, on the lean and mean front, we are, I am the only representative here. We have an interim assistant director. You can click to the next slide. Paul Boney, filling in for Pat Cashman, who resigned to join a startup in Portland, Oregon. but since we pay him hourly and not salary, I am here. So next. Traffic fund accomplishments in FY17. I will hit the wave tops here. The first bullet being a key one. When I took over Public Works, similarly to the story you heard about Church Street Marketplace, our fund balance was very small, only positive by deferring key capital maintenance. We have turned that around over the last 3 years. We started phase 1 and 2 of the garage repairs. Phase 1 is complete. We launched the pay-by-cell pilot and done a number of pieces. I'm really pleased that we have a great partnership and formalized the relationship with BBA through an agreement, and we have Kelly Devine, who's the director of the BBA, and Derek, who's helping out with the parking programs, also with us. So they're here to answer any questions after the presentation. Next. So what's happening in FY18? Phase 2 capital repairs on College Street Garage. Structural repairs being fixed, all new lighting, new HVAC, emergency backup generator, and a fresh appearance to a garage that's over 30 years old. We're also improving garage operations and services. With a new parking and revenue control system that we're acquiring with the airport didn't touch on it so much during their presentation, but we're working together to acquire the same asset to really leverage the efficiency in the city. And that will enable us to fundamentally restructure how we deliver service and transition from attendants to ambassadors to provide a higher level of customer service. Get people out of the booths, interacting with customers, helping with wayfinding. And then in large part through the partnership with BBA, implementing the downtown parking plan, doing things such as the validation program for downtown businesses, overnight garage leases for downtown residents. Our garages are largely empty at night. We're missing the opportunity to provide a service and to collect revenue. We're starting to implement the real-time availability in garages. Once the park system is in, people will be able to check by their phone as they're coming downtown for the availability in the garages, and also see it on the hairpin signs. We'll have some dynamic signs that'll say 500 spaces this way. So we're excited to bring technology into the system. I will say, third from the bottom, that Battery and Maple and Colchester and Barrett are intersections we've gotten a lot of pedestrian concerns on, and we're installing full pedestrian signals at those intersections this year. Next. The basic message, revenues are up 3%, expenses down 3%. You can see the net. We've been working to bring us to a more positive trajectory, though each of the last 2 years we have been able to manage our budget real time to get in the black both years. Next. Here's a list of some of the key drivers. I won't read them all. The new revenue control system will enable us to drive revenue significantly. We're very much looking forward to that. One of the things we haven't budgeted for is the Burlington Town Center. Once they knock down their garage of 500 spaces, that will drive additional parking into our garages. We're not budgeting for it, but will be a strong boost for us. Next. They have 300 long-term parkers that aren't associated with their business that would transition most likely into our facilities. Debt service payments on the expense side are going up. This is in large part to the bond for Phase 1 and Phase 2 of the College Street and Marketplace garage repairs. We're continuing to do more work with the business community, in part the DID evaluation that Ron Redmond talked about, and doing more services to businesses to help them with parking and traffic. Next. Let's also say that the most important piece that I'm sure is on everybody's mind, this budget is not predicated on any rate changes in the downtown area. I won't say that again, but we also, as that second line says, have accommodated in the budget for rolling back the hours of enforcement downtown based on the data that we are collecting. We have been under-resourced with the transition of assistant director, so I'm a little slower to get this to you than I would like, but it will come to you this fiscal year, that reevaluation of hours downtown. You can see a number of the pieces that were included in the downtown transportation plan, including replacing 2-hour free at Marketplace Garage with a validation program. These are things that were suggestions here. Clearly, they go through the commission and council for further deliberation. Next. And then for the next couple of years, it's important to state that the garages need $9 million in deferred capital work. We are launching about $5 million of that work now, committed to doing that. We have a remaining approximately $4 million worth of work that needs to be done. Our ability to make those debt service payments will likely require some revenue enhancers, but let's see how we do with the new park system before we make that decision. We talked about the flexible staffing. That's really going to help us reduce our labor expenses. Having people sit in booths is not the highest and best use of our talented labor force, and by freeing up people in those booths, we can have fewer people and deliver better customer service. Next. Questions?
Right.
Have you determined what the rollback of hours is yet? I know you said rollback, but.
Right. We have not, I said it was based on data collection, so.
You're still determining whether it's going to be 1 hour, 2 hours, or.
We're aiming to 85% occupancy. At this point, there's an indication that we may start later in the morning and end enforcement earlier.
Thanks.
Councilor Busher.
So, this is, thank you. This was good information. And Kurt asked one of the questions. This is a composite of what you're going to do, and then I just wanted clarity on the page that says downtown parking and transportation plan calls for possible rate and policy changes in the future, meaning that those bullets are not anticipated for FY18 or not.
We are not budgeting that we need them in FY18. It is possible that we will bring to you during FY18 some of those recommendations that could either tee up FY19 additional borrowing needs to do the additional capital work that we were talking about, or achieve other policy goals that we have. But I wanted to demonstrate to you that we are not in a position of needing any of those for this current fiscal year financially.
So the data indicates adjusting rates down on underutilized meters and up on highly utilized meters would not occur. I mean, I think that these are conversations that obviously.
Right, we are not depending on them for financial, for meeting our budget, but that we do want to start implementing the plan, and long-term, as I said, we'll need more revenue enhancers to finish phase 3 of the garage improvements. But how we do that is a conversation with the commission and the council.
Thank you.
I'm going to jump in. That's okay.
Go ahead.
Can we go back to slide 6, which is the one about the traffic fund budget overview?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is showing deficits, but then the last bullet says you budgeted for deficits, but you actually had both years in the black.
That's
So I
correct.
thought we had surpluses in the traffic fund.
Yes,
Okay.
when I took over, it was a couple $100,000 in fund balance. We are now well over $1 million, and we actually were over $2 million, and we are drawing $1 million of fund balance to do second phase of the capital repairs. So you're seeing these are budgeted deficits
Okay, so
in
you plan on
16
that.
and 17.
So what is the current fund balance as of the end of 17?
We're not at the end of 17 yet. I can get you
Okay,
that.
as of
I am-
today, 5:55 p.m.
Do you have, did you
Let me
check
just add,
before?
because I think what you're asking is in fiscal year 16, whereas they had budgeted the deficit of 328, they actually ended in fiscal year 16 with a surplus of $826,000. And so I don't have. the
So ballpark
cumulative-
of the
Yeah,
fund
it
balance
was over $2 million in FY17. We
going into 17.
no, towards the end of 17, but we approved using $1 million, and you approved us using
Yeah.
$1 million of fund balance for the second phase of capital repairs. So I'm
Okay.
expecting by the end of the year that we'll have $1.5 million in fund balance.
Okay, and then the bond that you're referring to in this presentation was issued when? roughly?
Recently, about 90 days ago, and technically it's not even a bond. It is a construction line of credit with the ability to borrow up to $5.2 million, and as expenses are incurred, they are submitted for reimbursement.
If you remember, we did,
Yeah.
council approved a $2 million a year ago, and then approved a $5.2 million
Right.
again a few months ago. And then eventually we'll have to do a bond for the remaining $4 million that will be needed, that will also cover the full $9 million amortized over 20 years.
And was that part of the sustainable bond from the last fall?
No, this
It's
is.
all outside the-
This is,
okay.
yeah, special revenue fund, and the general fund is not on the hook. The revenues from the traffic fund are the collateral.
Okay, thank you. Counselor Dean?
A question on you're showing some partial year savings in labor because of the installation of a new park system. What's the schedule for selection and installation of that system, and will you see increased revenues coming to you based on its installation and collecting, doing a better job of collecting?
Yes, the goal is to install this construction season. So the RFP, we've been working cooperatively with the airport and BBA, and our hope is to have the RFP out in a month and be getting proposals back and moving towards install. Both the airport and downtown are both very motivated for many operational and financial reasons to get this system in place. I know a number of the business owners downtown have been frustrated with our gate system that has sometimes been down at the least opportune moments. And trust me, I don't like the calls on the weekends either. So we are moving as expeditiously as possible to this new system. And it will be a pay station system, so people can pay either as they get back to the garage at pay stations or pay at the exit lane as well. So it'll be a much more flexible system. And we're making sure it can integrate with our pay by cell app as well, on-street app, so that we can really give people more ways to pay.
Okay.
Counselor Paul?
Thank you. On page 9, getting to what Councilor Busher was talking about, the possible rate and policy changes in the future. Replacing the 2-hour free Marketplace Garage with the validation program. Is that to say that validation means you buy something, you get validated?
Kelly, do you want to touch on this?
Yes, so the 2-hour free program in Marketplace right now, we found through our research, was kind of abused, pretty much. So in this case, you would transact some kind of business downtown. It doesn't necessarily mean you buy something. It could be visiting an office place, it could be visiting City Hall, it could be a variety of things. Because what we found, what we're trying to do is connect that program with economic vitality downtown. Right now, we have a lot of situations where people cycle through. You may be working up to a 4-hour shift or a 6-hour shift, and people are going out there and moving their cars, and there's really no way to be sure that they're downtown to do business. So it's really kind of any kind of business or activity you would be connected to.
All right, well, just want to go on the record as saying that I'm not in favor of that. I don't think that, this to some degree reminds me of the play-to-pay thing, and I don't agree with that. If there are people that are abusing the 2 hours of free parking, and they're doing it by driving in and out, the airport came up with a way to deal with that with license plate recognition, and it has worked extremely well. So I hope that there will be other ways of finding ways to keep the 2 hours of free parking, and make it so that you don't have to go into a business or go into an office. If you want to come down and be on the Marketplace and just be here, I don't think that that is a crime, and I don't think that you should have to pay or go somewhere in order to be able to park your car downtown. So
So,
Just gonna,
in
I don't
the-
want to open up a can of
We're not
worms and
gonna
have a
debate it
long
tonight.
discussion about it, but that's all I'm saying.
Yep.
I just was gonna mention, that's why we're keeping it at College Street and Lakeview, so it's still an available.
Well, but the Marketplace Garage is the center of where people park when they're on downtown.
Happy to have further conversations about this, Councilor Paul.
Thank you.
Can I just ask one question?
You can.
Can you remind me what drove the big surplus in the traffic fund? Is it the parking? Did it increase from 100,000 to surplus in the traffic fund? that we
Yes,
just talked about?
sure. The traffic fund net position, there are a myriad of reasons. There are some operational improvements we made. I think the largest impact was the rate changes that were made in November 2014.
That accounted for most of it?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Very good, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Great.
Thanks.
Burlington Electric.
All right.
Thank you, Chief.
Yep. All right. Hey, sir.
Big time, fund balance.
Okay, little condensed presentation, then questions?
Condensed presentation, when it comes up, thank you all for having us. I'm joined, Neil Underville, Burlington Electric Department. I'm joined by our Director of Finance, Chief Financial Officer Jim Reardon. We'll give you a brief presentation about the budget. As Rich is pulling it up, let me just start by kind of characterizing this year. This year for us has been a tightening of our budget as compared to recent years. It has the lion's share of it has to do with energy markets. We have a very low energy market right now and a very weak REC market. RECs are renewable energy credits. We've been selling, in particular, we've been selling RECs for the last number of years at a pretty good rate. We've been selling, upwards of $11 or $12 million a year, money that goes back directly in to buying down any rate pressure on Burlington customers. You can see here that we are proposing this year, we're not proposing any additional rate pressure, the 9th consecutive year without a rate increase. This is not without some work, but it's work that we've been doing over the last couple of years. Jump ahead one. Let me tell you, first talk about the budget drivers and then talk about some of the ways we've gone down. As I said, the renewable energy credit market, where last year we were projecting 10.6 million, this year 8.8 million, or coming in fiscal 18, 8.8 million. Just to put context to this, 18 months ago we were selling a REC from McNeil, and a REC 1 megawatt hour of that renewable energy credit. We were selling that for $50. 2 weeks ago we sold that same REC for $8.50. Now, one of the reasons that we're not seeing an 80% drop in this number is because we've taken a position over the last 3 years of pre-selling our RECs, so that up to a certain amount every year. So this is part of working in the market. So we're selling out 50, as much as 50 or 60% ahead. So 2 years ago, we were selling RECs for this year at $50 a REC. So what we're finding is this credit goes to our great team of power buyers, led by James Gibbons and formerly Ken Nolan, who made this decision. And we've been able to not see a real precipitous drop in this REC number. But this is where I put a yellow flag for the future. This is a merry-go-round that does stop at some point. We have purchased out-year RECs for the next couple of years, we pre-sold RECs for the next couple of years, but it is in declining amounts. So if the REC market doesn't come back, we're going to continue to see a drop in revenue that will have an effect on us. It's already having an effect this year, because not only is our REC revenue hurting, but we're having energy expenses going up. In particular, I call out transmission capacity in Tier 3. Transmission, the amount of money we're paying to support our transmission costs in the state and the grid. Capacity is kind of the overall amount of energy we have the infrastructure we need to bring in our maximum amount of energy. And Tier 3 is the new states program, the Renewable Energy Standard Program. This is a brand-new cost. This cost, it was $99,000 last year, this year going up to $400,000. Next year is going up to $600,000, and it's going to be continue to climbing in future years. Not to mention the traditional kind of increased cost in health insurance, pension, the labor cost of living increases. But we have been working to when it had one, Rich, right there. Over the last couple of years, we've been working very hard to reduce our controllable expenses, particularly around labor. We've talked to the council several times about our plans around voluntary buyout, and just being really disciplined about spending. What we're seeing is the fruit of those efforts paying off. We are seeing the trend are the red bars. So you can see if we had continued our 10-year trajectory based on our fiscal 16 number, those are the actuals, we would have seen a pretty big jump in our expenses. We have been able to, controllable expenses, we have been able to bring those down quite a bit and level them off going into the next year. And we, Jim and I continue to be very hawkish when it comes to finding budget savings. Importantly, we're able to balance this budget and bring it in without hurting our capital spending. This is a place folks go when you're really eating your seed corn, or with one of many metaphors you can use here. But if we're not spending money to make sure that we are upgrading our systems, that's money that's going to come back that we're going to owe later on preventative maintenance. So we're continuing a robust capital program, while at the same time continuing our investment in Velco. Just to remind folks, Velco gives us an 11.5% return a year. 12.5% return a year. I know we wish we could invest more in that. We can't. We are investing the maximum amount. One note that last year, our Velco investment is giving dividends greater. The last year is when the line between what we're paying in interest and the line when we get in Velco dividends crossed. So we actually make more in Velco dividends than we pay in interest off our revenue bonds and our general obligation bonds. So I had one more slide. Thanks, Rich. So this is just a sense of our cash. We watch cash very closely. We project to end the year with a little under $7 million in cash. Generally, this number we've come in higher on this because we always have very eager capital spending plans. We do spend a little bit less than that. We're starting the year with 11.8 and drawing down over the course of the year. We are requesting $3 million in annual general obligation bond, something that our commission has formally voted on and moved. They also voted to approve and recommend approval of our budget to the Board of Finance and the City Council. Cash is one of the, slide ahead, one of the important things we look at when looking at our Moody bond rating metrics. We see here that our 3-year average for each of our metrics is above our Moody's A metric. One that is not for this year alone, is our adjusted debt service coverage ratio. This is a function of simply having less revenue and more expenses. We are squeezing our net operating income, which is kind of the core look at how is our business paying for itself, down close to break-even levels. When we do that, we're also squeezing down our adjusted debt service coverage. We don't think, first, a couple points, we don't think this will affect our bond rating at all. This is a 1-year dip below. And secondly, this is a snapshot at the end of the fiscal year. If we look at it during the course of the fiscal year and really any other time, we'd be above that 1.5 metric. Secondly, is even though we're projecting at the end of the year 1.43, this is something we generally are conservative in projecting as well. Last year, we projected to be at 1.50, and we'll end the year around 1.65, to give you a sense there. So we're generally budgeting more conservatively. So we're doing all of this while at the same time funding our strategic initiatives that are in our strategic plan. So we're taking a holistic asset management approach to our our grid, making sure we're replacing condemned poles, doing animal guards, which increases reliability, replacing switches and reclosers, which increases our uptime. We've had since we've been taking a more asset management approach over the last couple of years, our reliability numbers have really, really improved. Last year we had the fewest number of unplanned outages than any time in the last 10 years. We took more planned outages, but planned outages are something that you want to take because you're actually doing work on the system. We're also doing a major overhaul for McNeil, a major overhaul of one of our turbines at Winooski 1. We're advancing our IT projects, including one of our big IT projects to replace our customer information system. This is our backbone system that everything runs off from. That's 25 years old right now. It's pretty old. We're not we're not slowing down on any of our customer innovation. It includes funds to keep pressing forward on district energy, a solar program that will be rolling out in about a month and a half, our Energy Champ, a scaled back microgrid project, nor is it getting away from meeting our goal of making sure every employee is receiving some form of education or training over the course of the year, something that our employees have asked for and has been met with rave reviews from our employees. So that's my condensed presentation, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Just a quick question about the proposed bond.
Yes.
Why would that be a GO bond as opposed to a revenue bond?
Generally, we've done a $3 million GO bond every year.
Every year you've done a $3
Yeah.
million GO bond.
I think there was a charter change, I don't remember when, but it allows for us to participate in that without a separate vote.
Interesting.
And given the interest rates are still low and we can take advantage of that money to put into our grid, we're requesting that once again.
It's part of the $7 million annual borrowing that we do, and it is paid through revenues.
Right.
So the city doesn't pay for it, but it is a GO bond, which does help in terms of the.
It used to be $1 million, right? And we upped it?
Yes.
Yeah.
What's interesting, it is GO and it's part of the charter, and if they would like to do it as a revenue bond, it would require a vote.
So this is 3 for BED, 2 for the city, 2 for the schools?
Correct.
Correct.
And you'll be part of the budget resolution, or it'll be a resolution that you'll be seeing, which we do again every year.
Councilor Jim?
Spend a little more time telling me about the tier 3.
Sure.
Because I don't understand it.
Yeah, I went over it fairly quickly because it can be it's somewhat complicated, but I'll try to. We have every state in New England has passed what they call a renewable portfolio standard, where utilities are required to meet a certain amount of their portfolio with renewable generation. There are different types of renewable generation. There's what Vermont calls Tier 1 renewable generation, which is like existing hydro or renewables that have been there a while. McNeil would be considered Tier 1. Tier 2 is considered new renewables, like if we were to build a new solar farm, that would be considered a Tier 2 renewable in Vermont. We have to have a certain percentage. And Tier 3 is what they call the innovation tier. And it requires that every utility in Vermont spend a portion of their customer revenues on innovative projects that will displace fossil fuel use. And it could be in a lot of different areas. So we filed a Tier 3 plan in Vermont that proposes to spend Tier 3 money on electric buses, on e-bikes, on electric vehicle incentive, possibly on district energy as one of our Tier 3. And that money is not spend it once and you're done. We're going to have to keep spending it every year. So there's a fairly steep growth curve over the next couple of years during a ramp-up period. But it does give us funds to help fund some of the strategic innovation projects that we think will really make a difference as we move toward a net zero energy city.
Thank you.
I guess we're all set?
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the party.
Already went. Yeah. That was a great turnout.
I love listening to it.
Thank you very much.
I do, I really do. I love it. I love it.
Bring it on.
Yeah. All right, who's advancing the slides? I think we're good, thank you. We'll have a department overview in history, principal concerns or FY18, questions and discussion. I have a lot less revenue than electric, so we make up for it with pictures. Last year I said we had the most complex job in government, so this year it's still the most complex. Bob said, would you like to say one of the most? And I didn't respond to his email, but
No, you didn't.
that was strategic. It is a very, very difficult job, and it requires us going in a lot of different directions. Some of our budget processes and changes reflect that. We have to strategically address the region's opioid crisis. We had a community staff meeting here today. We have a new position that handles that. People call Jackie Corbally a drug czar, but she is our citywide opioid policy coordinator. Again, that's a human capital investment that is new and unique and helps the city. We have to intervene in persistent acute mental health crises. For example, the last homicide is a very telling example of that on Church and Cherry. Coming up this weekend is the marathon, right? We had the Trump rally, 3rd of July, the air show. Of course, first night, we have to safely administer these civic events. Manchester and Orlando and San Bernardino remind us that it seems random where acts of terrorism occur, but they're always on our mind, and we're working on contingencies. Homeless and quality of life issues. This is we're at Church in Maine right now. I feel like everything's a stone's throw. We have some quality of life and homelessness issues surfacing right here across the street in front of the old Church in Maine restaurant. We police an international airport, protect our schools, clear accidents and keep the city in motion. And, all of this is, I'm in conference with, for example, Professor Seguino about racial equity and car stops. We have to do this in a way that is fair and equitable in accordance with the city's values. So I think that's complex. I'll go to the mat on that. So this is something that is a pie chart that we bring up most of the time because it doesn't change. It just gets more expensive every year, but this is
Explain after.
right. Okay.
Use it, go to the mat.
Yeah. Yeah. Salaries are by far the most expensive part of what we do. And as we make more investments in our people, our budget continues to go up. If you look at operating expenses, they're a tiny green sliver. Vehicles are small. Benefits, if you look at benefits and salaries, that says so much. Department overview, we presently have 100 officers, and there will be a budgetary increase to start growing our force for the first time in 15 years. 200,000 inquiries annually, 37,000 calls for service, broadly construed, 5,000 criminal investigations, 3,000 arrests, 1,700 traffic accidents, and of course we run the city's emergency communications center for not only us, but fire and EMS. Despite stabbing, Church Street sees drop in crime. I just wanted to say that I think that the investments that we're proposing to make in human capital actually have real good outcomes in the city. If you ask the people who were at this meeting, the reporter came to write a story about how unsafe and unstable Church Street was, and not only did our statistics reverse the course of that story, but the impressions of the business owners and people she interviewed did as well. And it is because of officers like this officer here on foot making a difference, and we want to be able to deliver that without a delay in our 911 response. Right now, there's opportunity costs we wrestle with in delivering our community policing and our 911 response. The city has an appetite for both, and we're looking to resolve those opportunity costs by increasing our headcount. Next slide, please. I simplified this chart from years past, instead of a flurry of data year after year after year. I just wanted to look at 14, 15, and 16. And the percent change is 15 to 16. But you could see that larcenies in a vehicle are up and drugs are up. I don't think anybody should be surprised in the midst of an opioid crisis. Every drug indication is up. Domestic assault, felony, and misdemeanor are up. That is because we have a domestic violence officer. I said a measure of her success will be an increase in reports of domestic violence. That's not a Jedi mind trick. I really do believe that people fear reporting domestic violence because they know that if they're left out to dry, they have to go home to the abuser. People are more confident about reporting that. But if you look at other, especially crimes that happen in public places, they're down. Aggravated assault is down, simple assault is down, robbery and burglary are down, larceny from a building's down. Intoxication is down. Mental health calls are 3%. They're about even, down slightly. That might not be statistically significant. And noise is down. And I hear the feedback from the street that feels the case. So I think that we're using our resources well, and I want to double down on these investments. Next slide. So that's where we get to Burlington Police Force to get bigger. We're looking for a 5% increase in our staffing over the next 2.5 years. That's driven by the terms of a federal grant that will pay for the 3 years anyway, just under half of that increase. Next slide, please. So what we want to create and sustain is, in our recent times, unprecedented expansion of the size of the department to first 103.5 and then 105 officers. The 103.5 is dollar cost averaging. It's not like just a pair of legs. Right, so that's going to be a year where we have half the year with that extra officer. That's going to go right into consistent, visible, enhanced foot patrol. I'd love to put folks on foot down on Maple and King Street. I'd love to make sure that we're not saying, well, we can police North Street and City Hall Park and Church Street and Maple and King. Unless something happens, then we can't, because we find that our officers a lot of times have to get back in the car and go answer 911 calls to make it work. 5 officers, if they're well deployed, will help alleviate a lot of that. It's not some magic bullet, but they will be assigned to shifts and locations that capitalize on foot patrol and community policing. We're sending 3 more officers to bike patrol. Folks with an interest in protecting the city's liability will be relieved to know you can't just ride a bike as a cop. You have to be trained to ride a bike. So we will have now 6 to 7 qualified bike patrol officers as of this summer. And the opioid crisis, it's a real full-bore approach. We have what's called Substat every 2 weeks. It's a county-wide meeting where the police chiefs and social service providers deal with individual people. A lot of them you've seen outside. Strategic plans for them, and then we have the community stat meeting where we look at data, policy, and people. And then we tell our officers, we have them, they're driving people to treatment, they're making arrests when necessary, they're doing interventions. It's very person intensive. Next slide, please. Current challenges, again, fatal overdoses statewide were up 38%. Every indicator from everywhere around us is that they're up again this year about that much so far. So it's if the measure is who's dying, it's just getting worse. Our overdose rate, as far as fatalities go, is at least 5, if not 10 times the homicide rate. Now the basis for homicides is 1 or 2, so that's why I say 5 to 10 times, because that denominator is crucial. But makes it the most deadly thing happening to Vermonters. It's deadlier than car accidents, suicide, homicides, manifold. That's going to be our challenge. Homelessness and its associated issues. Again, our last 2 homicides had a strong homelessness nexus to them. People put into duress based on shelters and living in encampments. Decimated mental health resources. Lack of consequences for the most persistent and vexing minor violations. The mayor and I were meeting on Church Street yesterday. We had a drink to discuss the opioid crisis. That's what we do. I mean it. When we have a drink, it's to talk about opioids. And Mike Reynolds came up to us, and I told him, put your cigarette out, stop harassing people in front of Lunigs, and please behave yourself. And he said, are you ever off duty? And I said, no. And then someone thanked us for just asking him to stop smoking on Church Street. And I looked at him, I said, this person owes about 130 tickets. And they said, why is, what the heck's going on here? I said, he has got the worst credit rating of anyone on Church Street right now, but I doubt he's looking for a home loan. So one of the things that we want to do is figure out creative and meaningful ways to not unnecessarily criminalize people who are homeless and mentally ill, but get them to modify their behavior. I don't think that's an impossible project, and I think that officers, men and women on foot there at the right place and time, are a deterrent effect. They do impose important social norms that I think are broad and fair and that we'd agree with, and I think that expanding the headcount will help that. And budget restrictions and partner agencies that curtail opportunities for collaboration. That's just saying it by way of putting it out there. It's not for our budget process tonight, but we'd love to see drug treatment in jail. We don't have good drug treatment in prison. That means that when we send someone to jail, we're not getting a rehabilitated person back. That's very important to us. We'd like to see, for example, better mental health resources so that when we see someone in acute mental health crisis, we know they have a place to go where they can be stabilized and get the right medications. And we're working with the state on that. But we recognize our limits. We recognize that our levers, our main lever, as I've said, are people. We have these other big statewide levers that we're trying to help pull as well a bit. Next slide, please. I'll wrap up. I'll go quick. Main increase is in police officer salary and benefits. I mean, that's just pretty much all of it, to be candid. I won't go through the particular numbers, you've seen them, but we're talking about investments in human capital. Every officer, a capital increase is every officer will have a body-worn camera going forward, which is a good accountability mechanism for both police and the people they interact with. Training budget is steadily increased, but we're talking about going from $70 to $80 to $100,000 when in a budget of $16 million. It's not a huge percent, but we're sending officers for bike training, opioid conferences, really exposing officers to different opportunities around the country to broaden their horizons. And we're using asset forfeiture. We've had a lot of money in asset forfeiture that we've been saving for a rainy day. I felt like last summer especially, it was raining in American policing. So we're expending, when you look at the capital things we're buying, big things, they're coming out of asset forfeiture, not the general fund. And there's nothing relevant in the FY16 audit. Increase in funds from residential parking. Our federal justice assistance grant used to go to the CJC. What we talked about with Bob is just giving them a city budget line from the general fund. This way, they're not beholden on federal, on what Jeff Sessions thinks or what's going on in immigration or how much the grant comes out to be that year. We'll figure out how to make that up in our budget, but we separated out that transfer of funds just to disambiguate it and give them a steady stream of funding directly from the city. And we're looking toward the Police Foundation to continue to do things like help our rebranding, buy our police bikes, for example, uniform items. So we're looking for other ways to fund things that run into the thousands. Next, please. I talked about staffing adjustments. So we have civilian training position, which was budgeted last year, will be spent this year going forward. Still looking for a taxi enforcement position. We can talk about that. We haven't filled it. People withdrew from the process. Opioid policy operations manager or coordinator, that's Jackie. She's this year. And new officers. Next slide. This handsome truck is coming at no expense to the taxpayers. It will take all of our non-lethal equipment, our reconnaissance robots, our shields, our polycarbonate shields, the things we need to secure doors and bring negotiators up, be all in that locker in the back. It has a light set. This is something that, thanks to the men and women in this room and the mayor, we've been approved to use asset forfeiture to take delivery of this sometime around the end of the year. And it is a physical commitment to our desire to end conflicts without lethal force. And yeah, the department will be, last year this slide said that I remember Chief Sherling was candid in saying that the department does not budget for major incidents and catastrophes. And I said we're the agency that's in the major incidents and catastrophes business, and I felt just a moral imperative to be conscious of that and start budgeting. And I think if you go back to that truck, that's a major incident investment. If you go back to having enough staff to handle 911 calls and police special events, that's about major incidents and catastrophes. And I'd like to look at you at the end of my tenure here, whenever that is, and say we're ready for major incident and catastrophes as a routine part of our budget and not be over a barrel for it. So that's the commitment I'm working towards. And main goal will be to reach 105 and sustain 105 and deliver services with a robust investment in human capital. I think that's it, right?
Yes,
so
that is it.
Right, great. Thanks. Thank you for your patience. I might have gone over.
I'm curious to know a little bit more about asset forfeiture.
Right.
Can you explain what are the cases where that can be something that a police officer does or the department does?
Yeah, sure. It's funny because it's been going on. I think one of the reasons why folks here don't know about it yet is we inherited about, when I came here, what was our asset forfeiture balance? It was about $800,000. So we had about $800,000. Chief Sherling spent very little of it. It was sort of being stockpiled. officers that engage in narcotics investigations, when when an arrest is made and due process occurs, it's called equitable sharing. So the agencies, if we're working a case with S6 and the DEA, just for example, and there's the proceeds of drug transactions seized, Essex and the DEA and Burlington Police would share it based on their time spent proportionally on the investigations. It's a federal process governed by federal law. I have to reiterate, as I did in the Burlington Free Press today, it cannot go into the general fund. We had Charles Simpson saying, why doesn't this go in the general fund? The answer is because that's illegal. What it can be used for are non-recurring equipment or training expenses that would enhance the operations of the police department. So that truck is a non-recurring expense. We had an opioid conference down in New York City, for example, that would have qualified for asset forfeiture. Buying a complete stock of new winter coats for the police department was something we spent asset forfeiture on. We also used asset forfeiture for our reconnaissance robots. So these are not things you're buying periodically as part of, you don't have like a robot line in the budget or a Colt line in the budget or an ERV line in the budget, so you spend asset forfeiture on it. I have to stress, this is not uncommon across police departments, but also not uncommon for the Burlington Police. I think it's coming to your attention because I'm spending the money that we've been accumulating all along.
Yeah, and the assets
Okay, does that
are,
answer your question, or?
and the assets are released only once the person is convicted. Is that correct?
Do you know about that?
Right, so in other words, it has to go through the whole chain of conviction, it's called DAGs, when the DAGs
Right.
come back.
Okay.
they
Yeah,
file.
thanks.
I'm Counselor Wright, and then Maura and I have a question.
I don't have a question, it's just, I want to make a comment, just hope your tenure doesn't end anytime soon.
No, I
And
I wasn't dropping a hint.
I'm very supportive of the increase in the number of police officers. The number of counselors here that's an initiative that we had pushed for. And lastly, I just want to, I'm glad that you did release the video just recently of the car chase where the guy tried to back over the police officer. I think it is very important, as you mentioned, that people see the tough decisions that police officers are face on a daily basis sometimes, and it's easy to point the fingers at the police officers and not think about what our officers go through.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you. And by the way, what I meant by that allusion to tenure, it's really a multi-year project to build up a catastrophe response. It's something that takes years, not 18 months.
Thanks.
Councilor
Thank you. So we have talked in the past about I guess I've had questions about why increase the number of police when there's such a high percentage of mental health calls. Why wouldn't we put more money into having more of the social work folks responding? And you told me it was at least in part because of the money coming for the officers was grant money, and it was only for officers. And we also talked about some of your thoughts in the hiring process and who you would be looking for. I'm wondering if you could just speak a little bit about that, one. And second, in regards to training and profiling and bias, I'm wondering how the department measures or evaluates training, how you know that something's working or not working.
Yeah, those are great questions, and that we could talk for a while about. So as the chief of police, I can say unequivocally that this police department, by national ratios, has fewer police officers per resident than comparable urban police departments, sometimes manifold. The average is something, I want to get this right, it seems to be like 2.5 officers to 3 per 1,000 residents, and we have something like 2 to 2.3. So don't quote me on that, but when you look at where we would be if we were simply average for an urban police force, it would be 115 officers. And that is for a police force that's conducting like everyday police work. One that wants to really do community policing really needs those 115 officers. So I agree that there are mental health gaps. I would, I will advocate for what I can do with more police officers. I know that the Obama administration released a budget report saying that next to investments in education, which I strongly support, investments in policing are the surest way to reduce investments in the number of police officers in a jurisdiction, if they're applied in accordance with community policing principles, are the most successful way to reduce crime without increasing incarceration, followed only by investments in education. That's not the President administration saying that. That's the Obama administration saying that. And I can get you the citation. We actually use that to apply for our grant. So what I see within my ability to influence the proceedings of the city is that the police department, led by the police chief, can use more police officers to reduce crime without increasing incarceration through community policing. And I believe that. And as elected officials and leaders of the city in the civic sense, you're entitled to say, no, I would rather invest the money here or there. I heard the chief, I heard the Howard Center, I heard people with differing opinions, and here as the government is the decision I'm going to make. I'm representing the interests of my department. As far as training goes, so we are onboarding a training liaison who is a training coordinator. It's training and special projects, who is a civilian. She'll be starting June 13th. She comes to us from Atlanta, but really by way of about 12 to 15 years living in Afghanistan, Japan, and Korea. She developed training for ESL speakers, Afghani employees of the U.S. government in Kandahar. So it should be an interesting person to talk to about developing training, not only having worked with people in uniform, but having worked with people from different cultures. One of the things I have to stress is that we don't control, we control so little of our training. I mean, I get police officers from Pittsford, which I'm going to the graduation tomorrow, based on statewide training curricula that I don't even sit on that committee. And I would love to have more influence over that. I don't feel that a one-size-fits-all approach is often the best for Vermont, because we're training officers and down in Pittsford to do a lot of solo rural policing, which is the majority of Vermont. They're being trained for that challenge. And then I need officers that have ESL considerations and multicultural considerations and cultural competencies. I'm not exactly sure I'm getting that. I'm hoping to alleviate a lot of that with not a cop working as a training coordinator, but a civilian working as a training coordinator who's lived around the world. As far as bias goes, I mean, this is a real question, right? I just sent an email. It's in draft form. I got to send it to Stephanie. But we're seeing that when you clean the data, and it's a methodological thing we'll be talking about, and we're using actually the methodology that she used last year. She just didn't have a research assistant to do it this year. But when you deduplicate certain incidents, we found that, for example, our hit rate across races when we conduct searches of cars is now equal. We used to have a 20-point spread. It's a 2-point spread this year. It used to be a 20-point spread in years prior. So that's a good outcome. We were getting indications, and we've been candid that like Lopez, for example, Officer Lopez, who was terminated, was doing things that were troubling, not as far as bias, but as far as his approach went to car stops, as far as legality. Around the time, I mean, we summarily fired the guy, and we released all of the body camera footage, and I stand by that decision. So I can't say that like we have a bias-free police department, because I know enough about policing and enough about people to know that that's impossible. If I could train my way out of it, we would be done with this. But I do think that things like our car stop data collection and things like having a police committee. We talk about commissions. We have a 53%.
Just remember, a lot of this can also happen in public safety committee meetings.
No, I mean, I'm trying to answer the question in good faith. I don't know if you
It's
just
an
want to.
open-ended question, but we do have one more item
Okay.
tonight, and I don't want you to feel like you have to
No. Believe me, I'll be happy to be interrupted. I'm not just trying to run the clock. I just don't want to leave Sarah thinking like I didn't answer her
Okay,
question.
Sarah,
I'm good.
Are you good?
Thank you.
Okay. So the thing was, just trying to add,
Yeah.
does the training work, and how do you know that the money you're spending on training is working?
No, that's a great question.
Okay, all right. So I just wanted to understand the additional obligation the city will eventually have associated with the new positions. So if we go back to 14, slide 14.
Sure.
Okay, so the grant pays for 3.5 of the 5.
That's one way to think of it. Yeah.
Okay.
No.
No.
Okay, so walk me through it.
So if you remember, I mean, we actually went, when we
That's
had
not
approval
accurate.
of the COPS grant, we
Yes.
actually showed you sort of the 5 years of increasing sort of city expenditure. And so and the budget that we actually gave you last week indicated what the increased costs would be for the COPS grant for fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20. So I'm doing this now totally off the top of my head, but I think the cost for fiscal year 18 was $160,000 roughly,
Yep.
net against the grant. I think it goes up 80,000, somewhere in that range the next year. And I think the next year, again, it's not a huge increase. The third year, the fourth year, you'll start to see very significant increases because the grant is starting to wind down to 3.5.
Right, the reimbursement
Right.
part will go
Yes.
down. and
So
we'll
you'll be
picking
seeing,
it
I
up.
mean, ultimately, you're talking about in year 5, if I remember correctly, we're talking about
Right.
$500,000.
Right, so it's not, and it's important to note when we say we're not just hiring all 5 right away. We're hiring 3.5 of the 5 to get a start on it, and then we'd like to hire all of the 5 over the course of the 3 years. The terms of the grant are that if we attrit back down to below that staffing level, just purely to save money at the end of the third year because we don't want to bear the full cost, then we can't apply for the grant again for a certain number of years. But if we keep those officers on for a full 4th year, then we can start attriting them and reducing the cost if we find it's unsustainable without grant application penalties.
But I think the council, when they approved the grant, was aware of sort of the long-term potential obligation of the city and still felt it was an important thing to do.
Yeah.
So this is not
Just remind
different.
ourselves of that.
Right, it's not different what you're hearing than what
Right.
was presented with the
Yes.
grant.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, thank you, can I just ask, on the other, the last slide, I think it was, the first thing that you mentioned, was, must not have been on that one, about the budget, about the, increases, permanent increases, in pay. And my question about that is, right there, the increases in officer salary and benefits have permanently budgeted. You know, are we paying enough that people are coming to us, going to the academy, coming back, and then taking those skills to the state? Are they staying here? Are we offering a competitive enough package that, you know, all of your hard work is being
Thank you.
rewarded by people?
For asking that question.
Retention, yeah.
You know, it's a great question. So the answer is right now, yes, and I'll tell you why. We don't have a large number of officers. We had an officer leave 2 months ago to go to Border Patrol, which kind of made us cringe a little, but he came back. He said, I don't want to work for them, I want to work for the Burlington Police. And it's not so he can do Border Patrol work here. But he came back. What we do have, and this will become a subject of collective bargaining, is a work schedule, which is 4 days on, 3 days off, 10-hour shifts. That is the most appealing work schedule in Vermont. So although our pay doesn't have exact parity with the state police, they always seem to be springing ahead of us at the end of each negotiation. We have a better schedule, and I will say that that schedule does not take advantage of what would be perfectly reasonable alternatives to increase the number of officers working at any given time by working a 5-day week. If you follow what I'm saying, we do lose administrative efficiency with our schedule right now. But it is a very compelling schedule when you add it to our pay and benefits to retain people.
Let me just sort of add, when we did the contract negotiation in fiscal year 14 and then the 4-year contract negotiation, we actually looked at the specific issue of parity with the state police. And at least through fiscal year 17, so I don't know where at fiscal year 18, at the first number of grades, we actually pay significantly more than the state police. And at the higher grades, we increased the step amount so that we looked at what the state police was paying, and in fact, at least through fiscal year 17, we were paying at least as much, if not more. So I don't know what's happening in fiscal year 18, but we designed the contract, and again, I would expect in the contract negotiations going forward, we would look at that again.
Yeah, and the other thing is retirement, which is a whole other story. I mean, there are folks that feel like the state police have a better retirement system, but that's not a year-to-year budget thing. That's obviously a much bigger question.
Yeah, all right, I mean, that's just a, you know, I mean, I hate to see us go and, you know, spend all this time recruiting wonderful officers who then, you know, within the first couple of years, but you've answered my question. And I will say, Brandon, that is a concern. I know a number of people who have had an interaction with an officer They try to call that officer the next day and are told they're not going to be there for 2 days, or 3 days. That is difficult from a public perspective, but nothing that you don't already know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Paul. Anybody else? All right, thank you, appreciate that. And Chief, just so you know, we appreciate your going to the mat. Councilor Busher takes it a step further and goes to the mattress.
Yeah, I think in fairness, we need to, someone needs to explain that. We need to.
Maybe not while we're.
It's an old joke.
Where I just leave,
Maybe not on Channel 17.
Yeah, Councilor Busher.
Just,
What do you think, Councilor Wright?
It's a very
Should we-
firm mattress.
Should we
It's practically
discuss it right here and now?
Thanks. The last item is regional programs.
Actually in retirement, and
Retirement.
although Rich is going to show you the retirement budget, I'm really not going to spend time on the specific budget. I want to give you an overview of where we're at with retirement, because the budget is sort of built on that. Normally, we would have done the retirement last week, but we were still working with our actuaries related to the valuation, and today BERS actually voted to accept the regular valuation. Just to give you some highlights to sort of understand sort of where we're at, in fiscal year 15, we actually had a loss in our assets of about $500,000, if I remember. So remember, we're supposed to hit an 8% return on the investment. We actually had a loss. We had a loss again in fiscal year 16, and that was about $2 million. So this has helped to explain we have moved our assets to a different location. We actually had a report today from our consultant that we're actually doing very well right now, and actually we're ahead of the 8% target. This is the fiscal year 18 is the last year in the contract where the city's contribution based on the valuation is supposed to remain at $9 million. The city does contribute more than that because we are now funding the operations of the retirement system, not coming out of the retirement fund, but we're actually funding it through contributions from all the city departments. So we're putting in about $300,000 more. It did not seem to make sense to take an underfunded system and have money coming out of it to pay for operations. We looked at the fact that last year under the regular valuation, the city contribution was supposed to be about $9.5 million. For this year, the valuation has it at about $9.9 million. We will be adjusting that based on sort of our assessment of the open group method. But this will mean that the trigger that we have in place, that for the contribution above the $9 million that the employees will have to pay, the trigger will be in fact instituted for fiscal year 18. We're trying to work out those last numbers, and we will then hope to meet with representatives from each of the 4 bargaining units to go over this and sort of review the data so that they understand why we're doing it. Even with the trigger and the increased health insurance contribution that we will be doing, we did an evaluation with the 2.5% COLA increase in fiscal year 17 and the 2.75% increase in fiscal year 18 and steps. Employees still will be making more money than they would have been even with these triggers that are going to be in place. So, I mean, that's sort of an overview, and again, the budget is sort of just based on the information I just gave you. If you now want to go to the, unless, any questions
The
on?
bottom line is no change in their dedicated retirement tax.
That is correct. That is correct.
And what you just gave us in a soundbite will be expanded a little more at the Board of Finance at some point when you know more about.
That's correct.
Okay, thank
Because as part of the budget resolution, you will have to approve the trigger amount.
Right.
Could I just ask the valuation, are you talking about the valuation for the period ending when?
Fiscal year 16,
So that would be ending June 30 of
2016.
16. So why are we talking about the valuation now?
Because we got the valuation in December. We had some questions about the valuation, and we had given them some wrong information. It has taken us many months to be able to come up with what we now believe to be a sound regular valuation.
Okay, I mean, the only reason I'm asking is because there's a council resolution that it must be done in December, and for years it was done very, very late. like now,
Right.
when in fact it's not very helpful for the next year. But so that you've answered my question. And just the other thing I just wanted to mention is that, I mean, I'm very glad that we are doing better. I think in fairness, so is everyone else.
Yes.
The stock market is up 8% in the last 52 weeks, so.
We were looking at sort of the trend of where we were in comparison to other, and again, not only in terms of just the percentage, but where we're falling in with everybody else. I think we're doing better than more than 2/3 of the systems at this point.
That's great.
Yeah, so we'll see if that continues. And again, I agree with you that everybody else is doing as well, and we'll hope that continues through the rest of this year. So, if you can go to the regional programs.
Sure. So I am in it right now.
Okay, so a couple things. Actually, in New World, the city council and the regional programs are in the same section of the budget. So we just wanted to highlight that the council, charter-approved council pay increases are in the fiscal year 18 budget. If you go down a little bit,
Sure.
the $50,000 council initiative is still in the budget, and the budget resolution, because we've only heard from one counselor at this point, we'll have at least going to the Board of Finance, is Councilor Ruth's fiscal year 18 money for the 3-year program that he had. We will still have the $50,000, so throughout the year, we can have other initiatives that are presented to folks. If you go down, there are not a huge amount of changes. Slow down a little bit. In the regional program, CCTA is actually less this year than it was the year before, so you'll see a reduction in the tax rate for CCTA. Winooski Park is up, but it's actually less than it was a couple years ago. We're seeing one of the 2 taxes that are going to be going up is the county tax, which is a pass-through. Whatever that goes up, we have to accommodate that. V&A is a slight increase. And then if we go through these, you'll just see most of them are level funded. Some are slightly up, some are slightly down. You'll see the $65,000 in row 39, which is for the Congress Center. So for the first time, we have budgeted $65,000 as a ongoing, this is not a one-time revenue to pay for this, so this will be ongoing. And there are a few other new initiatives that are in the regional programs. One is a recommendation for money to go to the generator program. What we did, if you see, just go down a little bit, 1, 2, right there. We had $87,000 in the budget for the Champlain Senior Center. We've now broken those out into 2 different budgets, and both of them being $40,000 for the Heidelberg Center. They were $37,000 last year. They did request a doubling of that for fiscal year 18. We increased it by $3,000. So it's going from $37,000 to $40,000. Wanted you to be aware of that.
They requested a doubling.
What's that?
They requested a doubling.
That's correct. There were requests that were made that we did not include in this budget. VCIL had requested $2,000. Big Heavy had requested $10,000. They previously had been funded. That was not included in the fiscal year 17, and it's not included in fiscal year 18. There also had been a request for sort of a person, sort of a omnibus. I'm trying to remember what the term was. Ombudsman, thank you. That's not included in the budget at all. And there's been an increase in the Martin Luther Day, the emerging needs, which is the sort of when there's an emergency issue, that's been increased by $3,000. So again, overall, there's been a slight increase in the regional programs budget as well. The 2 main ones that are important would be the CCTA in terms of a reduction in the tax in the county, which goes up when there's an increase in that tax.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
In looking at this budget, Bob, the only question I have is there are 4 organizations that we included in the budget in FY17. American Red Cross, King Street, Jazz Fest, and Turning Point. Mm-hmm. We gave them a certain amount. They didn't use that.
They haven't as of yet.
Well, so they're, okay, so in other words, like in the case of Jazz Fest, they don't take that until June?
It's one of the things I've looked at is if, so no, they have not yet taken it at this point. If you see, they have in the past, however, taken the $2,500. So in fiscal year 16, they actually did take the money.
Yeah.
And they actually did also in fiscal year 15. So when putting this together, when I saw an organization that had not yet taken the money in 17, I looked to see had they taken it in the previous years.
Okay.
And so I would expect they will in fact take it by the end of the fiscal year. They have a month and a half.
All right, I'm just, I just wanted to make sure that if we're, that they're actually gonna take the money.
Over the last 2 years, when we have seen organizations not take it for a couple years, we have not included them in the next budget.
Yeah, okay, thank
Councilor
you.
Busher.
Yeah, so, Bob, you mentioned the senior center, but
Yep.
there are two places. There's regional program, Champlain Senior Center, and then there's the
So- Yep.
Heinenberg,
Yep.
Senior Center, excuse me. And so, is the Champlain Senior Center, is that being funded also still? I mean,
So that money
because
is,
that money, you had 87,000, which I thought was split between both senior centers, and you've got St. Joe's, so I was just trying to figure
that
out.
money is actually being transferred to Parks and Rec for the work that they're doing.
We're saying, so the Champlain Senior Center money is going to Parks and Rec, which is what but it's there, that 40,000.
That's correct.
And so you're giving the same dollar amount to both senior center functions.
Correct. Whereas
Okay.
the second one is going to go directly to them.
This won't be a surprise, but I think that we should, as a community, look at whether or not we need to increase that amount. Councilor Wright, and I believe it was you, years ago, came forward with people from the senior centers actually asking for some dedicated funds, and we as a community said yes. And I'm concerned because I think that they struggle. I know Champlain Senior Center did, and I'm sure that the other senior center probably facing some of the same challenges. They depend on other kinds of grants too, so I'm just saying that I would certainly like us to think about if we haven't increased this for a long time. It's an important program for the community. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Thank you.
Councilor Moore.
So I'm thinking the same thing about, one, big heavy world. I certainly know of it as a important resource for a lot of youth in Burlington. What was the other one that isn't?
VCIL. I think it's Vermont Center for Independent Living.
I'm not as familiar with them, but I'm curious, sorry if this is another big question, but I'm curious how it was decided who didn't get money.
We have typically continued the funding for organizations. So those that were funded in fiscal year 17 continued that funding. I think in fiscal year 17, we did not fund Big Heavy, which had been funded in fiscal year 16. This is a process that occurs ultimately through the mayor and then through the Board of Finance and the council. And I guess, the bottom line in terms of what Councilor Busher is saying, everything's sort of a trade-off in terms of making a decision, and ultimately the decision could be made to fund one organization less and move money to a different organization, which is sometimes done in the past, or increase funding. But at this point, the increased funding you'd either have to find another place in the budget to cut, or to cut what we're budgeting right now as a surplus, which we've got at $50,000 as of today, which could change as of tomorrow.
In
So-
the 18 budget?
Right now we have, I think last week we showed you a budget that had, I think, $7,000 of a surplus. We've been able to do some things, and so we're now at a $50,000 surplus, and we still have a $50,000 contingency within the budget as well.
So I'm sorry that I missed last week, and so did a couple of us. So did you update the initial spreadsheet that you gave us?
We gave you a rolled up spreadsheet, and talking about the general fund?
Yes, sir.
So we gave you what we call a rolled up spreadsheet, but it had all the sort of numbers, and we showed in that as well what we estimated to be for fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20.
Oh, so that was there, okay.
Yes, we will for
Do
the.
you remember which night that is? Was it Wednesday night or Thursday night?
It was Wednesday night.
Okay, thank you.
And we will have a new general fund spreadsheet for the Board of Finance meeting, and that will not be rolled up, that will be all the lines.
Okay, so the next time, in terms of, are you all set with your question, Counselor Moore?
I'm sorry.
Okay, so let's just kind of talk about next steps.
So the next step would be, we will be bringing an updated general fund budget and any other sort of changes in some of the sheets to the Board of Finance on June 5th.
That'll be the mayor's recommended budget?
I believe that will be. What would be helpful to us would be if the Board of Finance members wanted to talk about any specific budget or departmental budget. That way we would ask for that department head to be there, otherwise we wouldn't ask them to come. So if you could let us know if there's particular areas you'd like to discuss. If there's agreement on the 5th, with the Board of Finance, and the Board of Finance votes at that night to support and recommend to the council, then we would hope to take it to the council on the 12th, and we're working on a budget resolution, so we'd have that prepared. Obviously, if no decision can be made at the Board of Finance on the 5th, the next Board of Finance meeting is on the 19th, so we would probably recommend a special Board of Finance meeting on the 12th to work out any sort of details, the hope being that the budget would be approved by the 12th.
Okay, so are there any requests for the administration? Councilor Paul?
The only request I have is, I feel badly also, I wasn't here last week. In the past, you have done that the 3-year projection as per that resolution that we passed a while ago. I'd love to have that in advance.
You actually, it should be in your packet. It was if you look at the last Wednesday, there was in the general fund sort of section, there was a general fund budget, and if you look, so it is there.
I'll look.
I must have missed it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I would like to request just an accounting of the $1.4 million pilot that used to go to the schools. The proposed, how that is proposed to be used.
I concur. In the communication that was handed out to us from the school, there were beyond what is being funded, there was a proposal for language. It was the second proposal on that sheet to deal with, and I guess for me, I felt communication is so important that I'd just like to understand what the thought from the administration is regarding that, and how we think we're addressing it.
I believe what they were talking about was an actual position.
Yes.
And I will also state, the first time I saw the document was Monday. So I believe in that document, they were requesting over $1 million of spending.
About 1.2 million, but some of that was already touched with the early essential.
No, I think what their proposal was an additional $1 million of new spending.
Oh, I thought, I'm sorry.
That was my understanding of what they were
So I
asking.
just want to understand within the mayor's
No,
recommended budget,
Right.
how that all shakes out. Because I know there is some budget relieving, some funds to relieve the budget, not only of the city, but also of the schools.
Correct. So one example used to be that they would reimburse us for the CCTA. We no longer get that reimbursement,
Right, okay.
which is about $150,000.
Okay, great. So if you just specify that, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Councilor Wright.
Just in relation to that, I am also interested in that issue as well, and I want to sort of examine it in terms of the city got this windfall of money that, it used to go to the schools mistakenly, but it went to the schools, now it comes to the city. So I want to kind of look at it examine it as on behalf of taxpayers. Like, if you're a taxpayer looking at this, it went from one pocket to another pocket. But if the schools end up having to raise property taxes because they don't have that money, and the city didn't have a commensurate decrease, I just want to be able to examine each item, as I think probably that's what Jane is saying, and say, okay, does it make sense what we're doing here in terms of, are we using this money to grow government? I mean, I want to be a detailed analysis of where we're growing government, what positions, et cetera, and I, just like last year, anything that's there, a written narrative, so I can digest it.
I believe we also mentioned that in terms of the general fund, there were only 3 new positions in fiscal year 18 that had not been previously approved. 2 are part-time, 1's full-time, and all of them are funded through a revenue stream. Some of that is from one-time money. So unlike previous years where there's been some significant increases in staff, there aren't for this year. But I understand what you're asking for in terms of the pilot.
Thanks.
Okay, anything else, folks?
So will we have, Jane, will we have a chance to, I mean, I don't have the other agendas, and I'm trying to remember what my questions were over the 4 sessions, and I'm not sure I can recall them. So I may want something else addressed. I know that questions were raised over the 4 sessions.
This is
so-
like your last opportunity, I
No,
just
and-
thought while we're all
and-
here.
Right, and again, even if you told me next week that you want a particular department to come in,
Yeah.
that would be fine. I just
Thank you.
would like to know.
Thank you.
And the other thing is,
Sorry,
we've done
I just
before,
can't
if people want to meet with us separately to go over some items in the budget, happy to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you. Okay, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
So you were spot on almost every single night. You said this last night.